Ladies and gentlemen, since we're already 14 minutes late and your schedule, though it's long, is tight, I would like to suggest to start our conference and welcome all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, EFRAG has grown up. It's true. That's why we chose the 21st anniversary, not the 20th anniversary. It's not true. It's a gimmick that Patrick told me. But it's true. We've grown up. If you can simply imagine that we will be something like 300 people in this room, and we have probably over 2,500 people that have subscribed, and that will be all in this room, or will be following the conference from a, let's say, Teams solution, which is amazing. Now, where are we coming from, of course? 21 years ago, we were small, private, fully, focused on financial reporting. And then we had a number of very, very important dates. Very important dates, such as, of course, 2013, when we had a reform. We had 2018, when we started sustainability reporting. We didn't start in 2020, we started in 2018. And also the organization grew, thanks to a lot of people, one of them being Jean-Paul Gauzès, who organized a complete reform. We have to be very honest. There was no way that we could have achieved what we have achieved on the 22nd of November. And congratulations to all the people who did a tremendous effort in getting us there, literally making sure that the first batch of the standards of the European sustainability reporting have been issued. I'm going to be very honest with you, even at the board, sometimes we thought, how on earth are we going to do that? But thanks to a reform in the organization, where we were able to make sure that the Sustainability Reporting Board was focusing on its technical standards and, of course, the European Common Good, and the same thing for the Financial Reporting Board, so it meant that all the rest could be treated through the admin board. And I think this, next to the enormous work that has been done by all those people for many, many years, brings us where we are today. And I really would like to thank you all the people who contributed that, and welcome you all to this conference. EFRAG has grown up. I'm going to push, but he doesn't do anything. Yeah. So, since EFRAG has grown up, we decided that maybe we should go for a change. And go for a change on the one hand side in the name, and go for a change also in our logos. Now, we were not too enthusiastic in changing the name. We had a long period of, let's think about this, how we will do that, and we changed the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group into EFRAG. So, as from now on, we are no longer looking at what the letters or the text stands for, it is what is behind. And that is why we also changed the logo. Now, if you look at this, it seems to be very small. We use somewhere the figure on the one hand side of literally Europe. That is where you see in Europe's voice in corporate reporting, both financial and sustainability reporting. But we also thought about a number of sub-logos. Sustainability reporting, we deliberately chose a leaf referring to green and to sustainability. And when we were thinking about financial reporting, we deliberately chose a graph, a financial graph, as the ones that you see on the stock exchange, and that is why we use this as a logo. As such, we want to refresh EFRAG and show clearly where we're going to. As you know all, and I need to be very careful what I'm going to say, EFRAG is always looking for additional funds to make sure that we can deliver all the rest of the standards on time and really qualitatively. And that is also why we launched already some time ago, but we would like to repeat it today since we're all here, to also the friends of EFRAG that we would like to use as smaller fundraisers, but still fundraisers, in order to be able to continue the path that we have chosen. Thank you very much. This is for my introduction. I am delighted that I can now introduce the first and most important speaker of today, Pascal Durand. Pascal Durand has been for years a member of the European Parliament, And he sat in the Constitutional Affairs Committee he was a coordinator for the group. He contributed to defining the Parliament's position on issues such as the Conference on Future of Europe's Transnational Lists and European Citizens Initiatives. He's a full member of the Legal Affairs Committee, the jury as we call them, where he initiated and led negotiations for the Parliament on the Sustainability Reporting Directive as a rapporteur. Mr. Durand, I'm very glad to give you the floor. Thank you.
Good morning, all of you. I think it's the worst moment for you. When a politician going to explain to specialists and experts and subjective politics every day. So I apologize for inflicting this on you. I'm very sorry for that. But however, I have a good news. I am the first speaker, and I think so you will be safe for the rest of the day. On a more serious note, I'm very grateful for your invitation. And thanks Hans Buysse, of course, for allowing me to speak to you on this festive occasion of EFRAG's 20th anniversary. 21, I don't think. I certainly do not pretend to believe that it is I who has the honor of this invitation, but that through me, I think you wish to show the importance of the role of European Parliament in the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and I thank you very much for that. You won't be surprised how important I consider this new legislation to be. It is a new entry into the 21st century economy, one that takes into account not only the need for a company to create value, employment, and develop its markets, but also to do so by integrating into its operational factors the finiteness of our natural resources, their peril, the importance of the climate issue, of human, social, and environmental rights, and as well as the impact an activity can have on its environment, on the broadest sense. This is coupled with a new, more sustainable governance. This is what the CSRD intends to change with the aim of making the market fairer, more transparent, and more balanced between all the players, and also, and above all, one might say, allowing greater readability and transparency for all investors, analysts, and stakeholders. And I would like to salute the great work of the Commissioner McGuinness and her team. Thank you. But in order to understand this economic upheaval, which represents a new challenge, it is essential to ask a new question. Why? I am saying here in front of professionals in the field of figures, as I have done in front of my peers, the lawyers, that the question of how, of which you are the practitioner, expert, and specialist, is no longer sufficient in itself. You know how to name everything that is counted, to put it all in the form of graph, of table, a cost, a provision, or a value. Yes, we will now have to ask ourselves, all of us, collectively, how to define in economic terms what at this stage was not necessarily seen as a value. And this is where is the new question of why comes in. This is a question that financial market participants and lawyers no longer have time to ask themselves, obsessed as they are by the need to find immediate answer to standard market problems. So the role of EFRAG is therefore absolutely considerable, since it consists in giving value to what until now has content for little or nothing. I cannot resist the pleasure of reminding you the McNamara fallacy. If you can count what is important, you make what you can count important. It's the real world. So it is a wonderful and indispensable task for EFRAG and all standard setters in our globalized world. And I am, of course, turning to Emmanuel Faber and the ISSB at this moment. Specific norms and standards so that a company is aligned with the objectives of the Paris Agreement, so that it ensures the preservation of ecosystem, human and social rights across the planet, so that, on the one hand, of course, it can sustain its activities and retain its markets and profitability, but also, and it is what is new in our world, so that it can participate in maintaining the planet, our planet, in the state of use. Usus and fructus, as the Roman jurist said, while ceasing the abusus. Once this has been said, your work must be made possible. This requires us to find a common language, to normalize and standardize what represents a new value for the company in terms of both the impact of it produces and the content it undergoes. This is a simple definition, which you may find simplistic, of the double materiality that has been the hallmark of the European view of non-financial reporting to date. In this respect, EFRAG and the new standards which have just been proposed to the European Commission and which will subsequently be the subject of a delegated act constitute a step forward in line with the roadmap that the Parliament and the Council have given you. And I would especially like to thank Jean-Paul Gauzès and Patrick de Cambourg and their teams for their work. However, I'm not forgetting, and I would like to say solemnly here, that the condition under which EFRAG is required to work, the little resources with which it is endowed, and the obligation to work on a voluntary basis are clearly unworthy of the responsibility that the European Union has entrusted to it. If we all consider that norm on sustainability and their standards in the years to come will be as important for the company of the 21st century as balance sheets and financial norms in the 20th century, then we must give ourselves the means to ensure that this work is not only remunerated as its fair value, but that it finds its place in an international concern and can be respected for that. However, today, the resources available by other standard setters, including the ISSB, and those available to the European Union through EFRAG are disproportionate and lead us to the risk, if not discouragement, I'm sure, of not being able to meet all the objectives that the European Union has imposed on itself in its legislation. I therefore turn again to the Commission, sorry for that, and to the representative of the Council. I don't know if we are representative of the Council. Maybe not. What a surprise. To tell them that it is imperative that they give EFRAG the means to operate in a sustainable and independent manner, so that it will be dependent on the goodwill of this or that body in the future. It's very important for European Parliament. I think it's a key point. My second wish is to see your work recognized by the Commission and the co-legislator, and not diminished in the forthcoming delegated acts, which will reduce the ambition of your standards and norms, either through in scope or through its future control and certification. This is the second salient point that I would like to raise today. We absolutely need extra financial norms and standards to be audited and certified tomorrow with the same rigor, the same independence, and the same transparency as the current financial norms. This is an absolute and imperative, and here too we must collectively, within the European Union, provide ourselves with the means for auditing and certification. To do this, I call on member states to think about auditing and to open up their market to new entrants, and by allowing certification by independent assurance service provider, IASB, and finally, to reconsider the current monopoly state of play. My last wish for you is that this work is not misinterpreted in the context of incomplete or arbitrary ESG ratings, which do not take sufficient account of the real impact of economic actors, of the environment and human rights. This is why I also encourage the Commission to regulate the activities of agency on ESG rating. I think it's a big issue too, as soon as possible, to ensure greater transparency of their activity and the methodologies they use, but also to ensure that certification and non-financial rating can be carried out by players who share the Union's values. This will require an end to the existing oligopolies. So to conclude, the success of this paradigm shift will be played out in the real world. And EFRAG is already making a significant contribution to this, and of course, to the future of our European Union. I wish you a very nice conference. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for these nice, inspiring and encouraging words. And I'm sure we will need it. And as such, we will move ahead. Before we move ahead in this conference, I have some practical arrangements that I still need to tell you. First of all, when we always say, people, please do switch off your phones. Today we say, people, please do not switch off your phones, but please put them on mute. Why? Because everybody during the conference can ask questions, and we will have resembling all these questions through the Slido application, and as such we will be able to bring up the questions forward and respond. So yes, please leave your mobile phones on. Don't put them off right now. Thank you. Also for people who need Wi-Fi, there's open Wi-Fi here under tunnel tells. That's also okay, so we're good. As such, we will really go into more deeper discussions and positions of a number of people that I would like to introduce. And the main topic, of course, is where is sustainability reporting heading to in Europe and internationally? And I think Mr. Faber made very, very, very clear reference not only to Europe as well as the only, let's say, creator of sustainability rules, but to the different organizations that we have. And that is why, first of all, we will have a presentation about this subject by 4 speakers, and then we will have a coffee break, and after the coffee break, we will have those speakers that will also be, or part of these speakers that will be in a panel. I'm glad to introduce, first of all, Sven Gentner. Sven Gentner is the head of Unit for Corporate Reporting, Audit and Credit Rating Agencies in the European Commission's Director General for Financial Stability, Financial Services and Capital Markets Union, DG FISMA. And Sven is the person, in all honesty, we work with about every day together. And I think for the past months, but also, of course, for the coming years. Thank you very much. The second speaker that I would like to introduce, of course, and I think, again, most people will know him, Patrick de Cambourg. Patrick de Cambourg has done an outstanding job in sustainability reporting, and you know he has been nominated as the chair of the SRB, but that is also only recently, where before that he was working completely together also with the acting chair of the SRB, Christine Lopata. But Patrick has already been working on sustainability reporting since I don't know, very, very long time ago, 2018 and 2020, you were really the man that was pushing this forward. And as such, we have him as the second speaker. The third speaker, of course, is Emmanuel Faber, the head of the ISSB, and we are extremely happy to have you here, Emmanuel, because it brings also more and more the international, let's say, aura and flavor to what we're working on. And the fourth person, of course, again on the international level, is Eelco van der Enden. And Eelco is, of course, responsible for overseeing the GRI's strategic work program and organizational management. I will happily give the floor. Speeches are here, and then you move to the place where we need you on the panel. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Good morning, everyone, and of course I would also like to start with congratulating EFRAG on its 21st birthday, and I get the impression that EFRAG has gone through a fairly uncommon development. As a child, it was mostly interested in financial reporting, which not all children share as a passion, and as an adult it suddenly became interested in sustainability. But we're very happy about this newfound passion, and we of course would like to congratulate EFRAG in particular on successfully concluding the European Sustainability Reporting Standards on time and as a draft. You all know that EFRAG has been working under a very tight timeline and only received final clarity on what these standards are supposed to cover when the agreement was reached in Parliament and Council in June of this year, and nevertheless the work was done on time. I think this is also due to the new and very inclusive structure that has been established under the guidance of Jean-Paul Gauzès, that includes a wide range of stakeholders, and through the SRB and the TEG really make sure that all of these views are heard and included in the drafting. So we're very grateful to Jean-Paul, who isn't here today, and we're very grateful to Patrick, who led the project task force, to Kerstin, who led the work as SRB chair, and to Chiara Del Prete, we should not forget, as a tech chair, who did a lot of the work. Now it is up to the European Commission to adopt a delegated act for European sustainability reporting standards. According to the CSRD, which is our legal base, these standards need to fulfill a number of key requirements. First, of course, they need to respect the relevant existing EU legal framework, and that includes a number of different pieces of legislation: the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, the EU Climate Law, the Taxonomy, and others. Our standards will not be policy agnostic. They need to respect the ambitions and the goals that we've set ourselves in the European Union in the field of sustainability. And the standards, of course, need to be in line with the double materiality principle. They need to cover both the risks that companies face and the impact that these companies have on people and on the environment. The ESRS are therefore not only directed at investors, but also at other stakeholders that are affected by companies or that are interested in the impacts of companies. And of course, ESRS should contribute to the process of convergence of sustainability reporting at the global level. The CSRD explicitly recognizes the important role of global standards, including, of course, the International Sustainability Standards Board and the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI. We want European standards to integrate the global baseline, which is being developed by the ISSB, to the extent that it is consistent with our legal framework and our policy ambitions on sustainability. And many of the disclosure requirements in the draft ESRS, which have been developed by EFRAG, have their basis in GRI standards. We very much appreciate the work that GRI has done with EFRAG to get to this conclusion. For us, it is important that this close cooperation with the ISSB, the GRI, and others continues into the future. Our goal is to make sure that the European standards and ISSB standards are compatible to the largest extent possible. Over the last few months, the ISSB, EFRAG, and the Commission have been working jointly to ensure that in the areas covered by both European and international standards, and that is mostly climate, definitions and concepts align. A high degree of interoperability between sustainability disclosures across different jurisdictions and a global baseline of sustainability disclosures are needed to avoid unnecessary complexity, to avoid cost for companies, but in particular to achieve our shared goal of moving to a more sustainable economy. We know that for the time being, ESRS will cover more areas than the ISSB, and we know that our double materiality and wider stakeholder perspective are broader than the ISSB's approach. But that should not keep us from aligning on financial materiality and ESG topics that we cover both. I'm very grateful to the ISSB and in particular Emmanuel Faber and his team for the strong commitment that they've shown to this process. I think we've come to a very good understanding that we share the same goals and that by working together we can create a basis for the success both of ESRS and ISSB standards. Practically speaking, the goal from the EU side is clear. Given our wider approach, we want to make sure that any company complying with ESRS also fulfills the requirements of ISSB standards. As I said, this should start with the climate area. But we also need a process going forward when the ISSB will cover additional areas or when we in the EU establish sectoral standards. We are keen to keep up the close cooperation and we're looking forward to continue working with our international partners. I wish you all a very good conference. Thank you.
Good morning to all. Hans Buysse stole my opening joke about adulthood and 21st anniversary. I would only add that though I don't drink myself, in certain US states you are allowed to drink beer. So it's good news because you'll be able to celebrate the anniversary with a little alcohol maybe. So since the joke has been stolen, I will just jump to the serious matters. And I would like to convey two messages to this audience. The first one is that sustainability reporting is becoming mainstream with EFRAG's crucial contribution, not the only contribution, of course, but it's a momentum. And the second message, which I will elaborate on, is that we are very glad we have been in a position to deliver what we believe is a balanced set of sector-agnostic ESRS on time. So as regards the first point, let me maybe say that with the CSRD, sustainability reporting is becoming mainstream in the EU. This is no little decision. It is the first jurisdiction to do so. It is a major step forward in a journey to create a robust second pillar of standardized corporate reporting, with sustainability reporting on an equal footing with financial reporting as a goal. It might take time, but it's a game-changing step. So, and of course, sustainability reporting standards, now known as ESRS, European Sustainability Reporting Standards, are required by the directive as its indispensable operational complement. This legal framework combining Level 1 and Level 2 provisions mirrors the structure successfully adopted by financial reporting and is indeed a key success factor for sustainability reporting. EFRAG is proud to be tasked with the elaboration of draft standards as technical advice to the European Commission. We fully understand the public interest nature of the delegation we have received and the specific responsibility we are entrusted with. EFRAG started working on this under the umbrella of the lab that was created a few years ago. At the request of the Commission, we started on sustainability reporting per se in project task force mode in September 2020. First, to carry out preparatory work. Second, to elaborate exposure drafts that were submitted to public consultation in April 2022. In parallel, as already mentioned, EFRAG was creating the second institutional pillar dedicated to sustainability reporting with a board and a tag. In March 2022, the project task force seamlessly passed the baton to the SRB and the SR tag, which are fully in charge since. Let me highlight the clear standard setting model chosen by EFRAG for both pillars as a matter of fact, in order to reflect the EU-specific context and diversity and its culture. The key option is to operate from a multi-stakeholder composition to make sure that what is done is aligned with the broadest spectrum of expectations. To reflect in its composition the specific context of sustainability reporting, EFRAG has added a civil society chapter which complements the pre-existing chapters. From a general standpoint, the counterpart is that all members of SRB and SRTEG have to promote and seek consensus, arbitrating in the best of all spirits between the various ideal expectations. As an illustration, I'm happy to be able to say today that under Kerstin's Lopata leadership as acting chair, and following very dense discussions, the SRB achieved consensus mid-November on 12 draft standards delivered as technical advice to the European Commission. The vote was unanimous, except for one abstention in relation to 5 standards out of the 12. I would like also to mention that even if EFRAG was under resource and time pressures, we've been able to comply with all the steps of a demanding due process. This is paramount for EFRAG and the quality of its standard setting. Now, a few words about the balanced set of sector agnostic ESRS that we delivered a fortnight ago. The consensus I mentioned earlier did not happen by accident. From exposure draft to draft standards, intensive work has been carried out to improve relevance and adequacy before releasing our technical advice 2 weeks ago. As former chair of the project task force, I knew when the public consultation was launched that the EDs were most probably on the high side in terms of required information depth, and that we would have to revisit terminology and relevance in certain cases, depth and phasing in all cases, and the allocation between sector agnostic and sector specific disclosures. I knew also that we would have to work further on our compatibility with other key standard initiatives, though they had been taken into account from the very beginning. From the end of April to mid-November, we organized the public consultation with about 500 respondents filing 700 surveys. We organized 16 outreach events, and we had many other opportunities to interact with our stakeholders. We also launched and analyzed the cost-benefit analysis performed by a recognized consultant, and once informed, at board and TEG levels, we had very fruitful debates, sometimes early in the morning, Kerstin, 7 o'clock, for instance, allowing stakeholder representatives to express views and concerns in a constructive manner and to find the path to an acceptable consensus. All the above fueled by the work performed restlessly by the Secretariat, which I want to pay tribute to. The outcome in a nutshell: 4 major improvements. 1, a reduction of the disclosure burden by 45%, while by the same token improving substance and potential efficiency of the reporting under double materiality. 2, of course, an alignment with the final CSRD following the trilogue conclusion in June, and a careful onboarding of other relevant EU regulations. 3, a fine-tuning of terminology and concepts to adopt the 4 internationally acknowledged reporting areas and to replace the rebutable presumption by a simpler approach combining mandatory disclosures and disclosures subject to materiality assessment. And 4, a careful monitoring of potential differences with other standards, in particular the ISSB and GRI, to foster commonality and interoperability to the maximum extent possible and avoid at all cost multiple reporting. We believe the outcome is a balanced set of standards, which I hope is a reasonable compromise between the various levels of expectations. We do hope that our assessment will be shared by all stakeholders. On the preparers' side, we know that implementing this may still be a challenge, at least for the smaller large, quote unquote. However, the CSRD tactfully introduced phasing in provisions We, of course, recommend starting the implementation process as soon as possible. On the other side, we know that more information may have been expected, but we think the proposed step forward is a major union-wide achievement already. In both cases, time is of the essence. Supportive from the beginning of a global momentum, we made every effort to ensure interoperability with the ISSB work under an investor focus and with the GRI standards under an impact focus. Our goal is that whoever is complying with ESRS, as Sven said already, would also comply with the ISSB future standards, and that businesses applying GRI standards will be well prepared to elaborate their ESRS reports. As stated almost 3 years ago by Vice President Dombrovskis, the EU must capitalize upon and contribute to relevant international initiatives and the development of sustainability reporting globally. Beyond a balanced and interoperable first set of standards, as required by the CSRD, EFRAG has already started elaborating the future sets with a focus on SMEs, listed or not, and sector-specific standards. We will do this with the same dedication and under the same strict due process. To conclude, I would like to pay tribute to all contributors to the EFRAG adventure and to its international partners. Their enthusiasm is an inspiration for all of us. It demonstrates the strong momentum that supports the development of sustainability reporting, which, if carefully implemented, is so crucial for people and planet. Thank you very much.
Friends, first of all, joke aside, this debate about whether that the 20th or the 21st anniversary of EFRAG is interesting because it tells how nature can actually change accounting in many ways, because without the COVID, we would all be very clear on what the nature of this event is. I'm here, first of all, as a friend of EFRAG, proudly so, I guess. Having signed accounts of a European company for more than 20 years as a CFO and then a CEO and a chair, but also because I suddenly used a bit of my personal time after I had a bit of time in 21 to support Patrick and the establishment of the team that has delivered the incredible results that are shared today here. And more personally, I can say that probably the first person that knew about my potential interest about joining the ISSB was Patrick. We were more than a year ago discussing together about this, and I learned a lot from Patrick about how important it could be, what I'm doing as much as what EFRAG is doing, and to just make sure, as Pascal said earlier, we count what truly counts. So with that, let me maybe start by saying, this book of Mark Carney, where he wrote about the tragedy of Horizons, Mark said that to deal with this tragedy, you basically need two things to happen at the same time. One is policy making that sets the objectives, the standards, the incentives to ensure that there is a collective movement. And the other one is well-informed and transparent capital markets that can enable and support those policy making. And I think this is really what makes this event so powerful, I think, and important, because very clearly with the Green Deal, Europe has taken the leadership on the policy side. And I think it should be commended for that. And I think we can realistically say that we wouldn't be where we are gradually at the international level, including on global policy making, if Europe hadn't done that. In the same time, it's very clear that Europe will not solve, in particular, the climate topic alone. And this is where, in the unfortunate absence of multilateralism now, even on climate, the global capital markets are the only connector of economies around the world today. They actually connect all economies around the world every second, 24 hours a day. And they are by nature the source, the organic source of financing for this ecologic, environmental, and social transition that is needed to come with more sustainable economic models overall. So we consider global capital markets, as much as actually European capital markets, are absolutely fundamental allies of those global policies, and in this case, of the European global policy. I'm saying global because, as you know, there is some extraterritorial thoughts about what the European legislation is going to be about, and this is where also the connection with what we do is so important. On that second front, I'd like to say that probably as a European citizen, but also having been involved over the last several months in the joint work that happened with FISMA and EFRAG, I think the European authorities can rest assured that all the opportunities and guidance that emerged from the CSRD's draft of June 27 have been dealt with by FISMA and EFRAG in their effort to create this interoperability, this cost reduction for preparers, this comparability for investors through the hard work, indeed, that took place from basically September and through October and early November. On our side, what happens here in Europe obviously has a lot of meaning. It is substantive. GDPs of Europe is 18% of the total GDP. There are many, many international preparers here in Europe as well. There are many European preparers that have international investors. Probably more than half of the largest listed companies in these countries' shareholders are outside of the EU. So this is absolutely fundamental that Europe contributes, as we have started to do, to the construction of the global baseline. And of course, as Sven and Patrick alluded to, the ISSB's work is as integrated as possible into the format here in Europe. We have chosen to entirely redesign our redeliberation strategy at ISSB to ensure that we could meet the super tough deadlines of the European work. I think successfully so, and I will comment in a minute on this, because I think that, and that would be the conclusion of that second part about the interoperability, we are now working with a joint objective of a clear interoperability that will, and we understand the objectives on the European side, that preparers under ESRS can comply with ISSB. We have exactly the symmetrical objective through that discussion that preparers of international sustainability standards, by using properly our interoperability mechanism, can prepare, adding in particular the mandatory or the double materiality aspects of the European standards and be compliant with these European standards through this interoperability table. We've been discussing this now for, I think, about 2 months. We expect that the next 2 months maybe will allow us to finalize the work on both sides. We still have a bit of work, including the creation of a user's guide of that interoperability table, and that table will apply to S1, our standards, foundational standards, and S2, which is climate. But as Patrick has said, we expect that we would update that table as we develop our own future standards, which is my third and last point for this morning, which is that we are now embarking already on the next stage of our standard development. We expect S1 and S2 to be balloted around March, to be ready for adoption and endorsed by IOSCO, as mentioned by IOSCO already, in a manner that would make preparers and countries that want to use our standards ready to use them on their 2024 cycle. There's no decision from the board standpoint today, but that's basically what IOSCO is looking at for us. So in a manner where we are making the most efforts possible to align the preparation of standards and also towards what is going to happen in terms of timing here in Europe. After that, we are already embarking immediately on an add-on and an extension on our climate standards to natural ecosystems, biodiversity, water, deforestation, but also the just transition, so the social and human capital aspects of the climate transition plans and the climate resilience plans of companies. How do they address their most vulnerable workers, the reskilling, the transformation, the restructuring, the vulnerable communities in their supply or value chain, et cetera, et cetera. So that's going to be an immediate part of our work. And of course, we will also capitalize on what ESRS, but also our friends at GRI have done on that. And we have with the IASB standards that we are internationalizing next year, a lot of substance that we will embark and continue indeed as much as possible to create this further interoperability in the future. One last thing I would say for this morning is that our staff has published our papers for the Montreal board meeting that will occur next week. One of these papers is about creating a very strong conceptual framework that designs and defines the pathway from sustainability to value creation, financial value creation, investor materiality, in a manner that would, we hope, create the foundation to move away from the ESG tagging all over the place and the alphabet soup that we have today into a very structured, integrated narrative around how sustainability informs the creation of value by companies for their capital providers, financial capital providers. And maybe back to what Pascal was sharing earlier, this is rooted in the integrated reporting framework that is now part of the ISSB's legacy assets with the consolidation that occurred in August this year with the framework, where we're basically stating that a company's sustainability and sustainable development is about its ability to preserve, maintain, develop, and regenerate human capitals, natural capital, and through that appropriate regeneration, create value that also generates value from the financial capital cycle standpoint. And that connection, I think, is also probably going to be subject to the board's vote on that, of course. Today, it's a public paper. We need to deliberate on that next week in the middle of COP15, by the way, in Montreal. And provided we come to some form of conclusion in Montreal about this, I think that can form a pretty strong common approach in many ways between where the Europeans' policy objectives are rooted in terms of thinking and what we do with our yet clear remit, which is about investor and financial capital providers' support to the transition. So with that, let me really finish by just commenting the work that already a few of my colleagues here have mentioned or shared. Sven, Patrick, Kirsten, and many others, Eelco, who is here and will speak after me. We have learned to work together. I think there is much more that can and that we will do together, and with that, commending EFRAG for its 20.5 year. Thank you.
I have 7 minutes, so I wrote it down. I am famous for overstepping my time. Yes, you may. So congratulations to EFRAG. 21 years old. We're 25 years old. It's not a mean feat. And with an unprecedented pace, EFRAG was able to produce European sustainability standards. A pace, by the way, which I have to say, appeared sometimes as a bit reckless. But they pulled it through, which is a tremendous achievement. And I think the most important things that were introduced by EFRAG were, first of all, double materiality, and secondly, assurance, both mandatory. Let me start with the first one. No sustainability reporting without reporting on impacts. If impact reporting is not included, you just have financial reporting on environmental, social, and governmental topics. That, in fact, would just be confirming the status quo, adding focus on reporting on certain topics that were not specifically mentioned before. Very important still, capital markets do matter, but it's only half of what is needed. We as GRI, by far the biggest standard setter on impacts, 78% of the Fortune 250 and 66% of the next 50 to 100 international operating businesses report voluntarily under our standards. We are extremely proud to support and share our multi-stakeholder DNA with EFRAG. However, the closer EFRAG keeps cooperating with GRI and with the ISSB, the better it is. The more comparable data we see in the international markets for both investors, governments, suppliers, clients, employees, the societies we operate in, the better it is. It is about comparable data. Fragmentation is bad for business, fragmentation is bad for comparability, and it's bad for our planet and the objectives we all have. Because we must not forget why we are here. We are here, in fact, for a reason. Sustainability reporting is there for a reason. It is to contribute to the objective to create a happier, healthier world for all of us. It is to create an inclusive society where we all can thrive and prosper, not reporting as an objective by itself. Mandatory assurance, although limited, still it is assurance. And it's a great step. And why is it important? If we say reporting on finance is as important as reporting on impacts, then of course it deserves the same treatment. And you have to treat it as equal. In 10 years' time, I predict that there will be not one investor that will take serious a report on impacts without external assurance, as they currently do with financial reports. So, how to get around this? For financial reporting, we see assurance by a whole industry. And how will that work out for assurance on impacts? Having a background in this field, I would strongly advise not to experiment with assurance on impacts and stick to the current infrastructure. So no experiments with joint audits, new regulated parties into the assurance market, and just first wait until the work of the IASB has been done. And why do we need assurance? To fight a big evil that is called greenwashing. Greenwashing, to me, on impacts is on par with financial fraud. It undermines the credibility of a whole system. It makes people make decisions on perceptions and not on facts. And the threat is not to be underestimated. Let me close with a big thank you to EFRAG and all our colleagues that put off this magnificent feat. And a plea in line with Pascal Durand's. Standard setting is no easy business, and maintaining and updating standards even less. This means an investment is needed. We at GRI are of course committed to an intensified work plan for the next 3 years, and we will issue new standards, increase our sector program, review all the old ones on a global theater, and will keep supporting EFRAG and the ISSB on their endeavors. But as a not-for-profit organization serving the public good, we know from hard and bitter experience how difficult it is to obtain funding for those for-good activities. I therefore find it hard, like Pascal, to explain that an organization like EFRAG, working for the public good, as part of the bigger scheme of things within the whole framework and the idea of the Green Deal, does not has received yet an adequate budget from Europe to deliver without volunteers. I think this is a big political mistake. And it's hard to explain, I think, to society and taxpayers. So please, political decision maker, provide EFRAG with the funds it needs. And this is, of course, also self-serving, because they should also keep on engaging with professional organizations like GRI. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I kindly ask you to take your seats back again. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We're going to start a panel discussion guided and coordinated by Patrick de Cambourg.
Of course.
S'il vous plaît.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emmanuel. It's so good seeing you.
Yeah, it's great.
Finally,
Yeah,
yes. Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
We are mic'd on.
Yeah,
We are mic'd on.
Oh,
Yes.
hi guys.
Oh, good.
How you doing? Yeah. Now it's live.
We're mic'd
Okay.
on. So we are mic'd on already.
Take a seat.
Your mic is on. Be careful, wait. Yeah, I'm normally, this is there. I didn't test if it was.
Is that the right one, Martin? We.
Huh?
5,
Hey, hello.
4.
I'm fine, how are you doing?
There's something here. I don't know.
No, that's mine. I put it here.
Can I borrow
That's
the
it?
chocolate?
You can have all
Ladies
of
and
them.
gentlemen,
Yes.
ladies and gentlemen, please.
So Emmanuel wants some
Do you hear me?
Oh, I have to.
I know what is the pleasure of networking. This is one of the interests of those events, and I don't want to interfere too much, but now we have to move to the panel. So thank you very much, and good morning again to the participants in this room and to the participants online. Our panel is dedicated to with distinguished panelists, to the key questions revolving around the sustainability reporting. You know, on my left, you know already those gentlemen that have been introduced by Hans Buysse. I would like also to say happy birthday to both, because you took the position at ISSB level. If my memory is correct, it was December 15 or something like that, but effective January 1st. And Eelco took the position of CEO also at
January
that time.
1st.
Yeah, so happy birthday to them. Anybody else in the,
Happy birthday.
Then, on my left, Kerstin Lopata. Well, she is a very distinguished academic with a key responsibility in the Hamburg University, but also in Luxembourg and in Hong Kong. But, you know, the key reason why she's here is not only for that. She is with us today because she was not totally aware of what was coming to her, but when she was appointed acting chair at the end of June, she felt that it would be for 4 weeks, and it was for 4 months. And it was the crucial moment, and she's been an extremely efficient leader, and she will share with you her views on the outcome of the first set. And then on my right, Sébastien Godineau, who was a member, by the way, of the first task force, so September 2020 and February 2021. He is a prominent person in the European circles on behalf of WWF and has a long experience in our field of interest today. So without further ado, we'll move to the panel. And we have jointly decided to address 3 key themes. The first one is the challenge of data quality in sustainability reporting. The second one is the factors for successful implementation. And the third will be related to the challenge of interoperability. This is a key topic for most of us, and we already received comments. So, but I think it is important to drill down further on this key topic. So, on the first point, challenge of data quality, let me explain how what we would like to hear from the panelists. You know, I think that everybody would agree that available sustainability-related data is generally considered today as insufficient. So therefore, the risk of greenwashing, etc. And many would say also unreliable. So quantity and quality. In this context, there is a key trend to give sustainability reporting a mainstream status. I said it in my brief speech. And standard setting is the starting point for that. While major efforts are underway, the question which I ask the panelists is, how far do you think we are today in the journey towards creating a reliable data environment in relation to sustainability matters that meets expectations and policy objectives? Because, you know, we tend to celebrate achievements, but, you know, a lot remains to be done, and we are starting from a situation that was not ideal. So how do we monitor progress, and how fast do we believe we can reach the ideal situation of an equal footing with financial reporting? So this is a question that I'm asking the panelists. And since they had not the opportunity to speak before, I will start with Sébastien and Kirstine. So Sébastien, on this question.
Thank you. Can you hear me? So I'm Sébastien Gentner. I'm a senior economist in our European Policy Office, and we started to work. Is it working now? Yes. Okay. So Sébastien Gentner, I'm heading our team on sustainable finance in our European Policy Office. I'm senior economist, and we started to work on sustainability reporting and the NFRD in the EU in 2013, 2014. Since then, we've been following up, and we are a member of the EFRAG. And indeed, as Patrick mentioned, the state of play of current corporate sustainability reporting is not very good. WBF is a member of the Alliance for Corporate Transparency, working on this sustainability reporting, and which found that in 2019, we assessed reports from 1,000 companies in Europe, and we found, for example, that only 36% of these companies at the time were reporting a climate target. I don't even mention biodiversity, which is much, much worse. So that was really low. And another example of insufficient sustainability reporting that may not be reliable or really robust or really strategic and meaningful is that recently a climate risk agency published an analysis on climate, corporate climate reporting, and found that more or less half of it was not really strategic and relevant to assess climate risk, climate-related risks and climate issues more generally, which means that some sustainability data which are strategic are still missing at corporate level. And at the same time, some data is reported, but in fact, it might be burdensome, but it's creating noise, and it's really strategic and meaningful. So that's one first, the state of play. And given that framework, we believe that the ESRS Set 1 is a really relevant step forward, as mentioned by Sven Gentner, by Patrick. It's a one-stop shop for both financial materiality reporting and impact, environmental and social materiality reporting, which is absolutely critical for us. It's not either or, it's both. And it's aligned as much as possible with GRI, with ISSB. So there was already very hard work to ensure interoperability. And it also addresses something really important as well, other legislative requirements in the EU regulatory framework with mandatory disclosure, for example, a file called SFDR, which is mandatory disclosure for investors. And this is already taken into account in the ESRS Set 1, so that's really relevant. Which means that ESRS Set 1 is a significant step forward. In general, as Patrick mentioned again, there was very hard work to integrate the feedback from the public consultation, notably cutting the number of KPIs almost by half. So there's a big effort in terms of finding a good compromise between completeness and usability. At the same time, importantly for us, it should not be reduced further, because there's a big compromise now, and there are already some issues which have been postponed or left out of Set 1. So that's the first step. That's really a first step, and it will have to be completed by other steps done by EFRAG, notably sector-specific standards, to go more into the details of sector-specific indicators to compare the peer companies in a more meaningful way, and also an SME standard that is already being discussed.
Thank you very much, Sébastien. So the bottle, which was pretty empty, is filling a little bit, or significantly, will be filled. So Kirstine, your point of view as an acting chair, who has led us to the compromise?
Yeah, thanks, Patrick, for the question, and good morning, everybody. Yeah, what Sebastian already said, I mean, I agree, but we have to look at why did you find the results you presented here, right? So we are coming from totally voluntary reporting over NFRD, who just gave us a little bit of guideline, and we now give guideline with our ESRS. So I think regarding your question, Patrick, the quality of data will, of course, increase right now. And I think, I mean, I do research on that point since 15 years, and we always talk about data availability and then data quality. And that's what we will see right now with our standards, because we give much more guidance than companies or undertakings had before. And if you look at how how financial reporting evolved, you saw the same, right? That's what we do with sustainability reporting right now. So you come usually with proper standard setting, then you have auditing, you have supervision, and you also have, of course, research on that. And another point regarding the quality. So if I look into my research, you see little correlation between the data from the rating agencies, which means the data that is available right now gives a lot of room for interpretation. And I'm quite sure that will change in the future. And we did the first step, of course, right? We climbed the first hill. We have to see what's coming out now. So I'm quite sure with the standards we released right now, or we delivered to the EU, we will have an increase in data quality.
Thank you. Emmanuel, on your side, because, you know, the bottle being not filled enough, the EU is making a critical move. How can we generate this momentum elsewhere, and what is your view about that, and in general, European wise, but also globally?
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. I will actually just take stock of what Kirsten has just said about it starts with standard setting, supervision, and assurance. Having said that, I'd like to take a completely also different or complementary angle, which I think is fundamental. As a preparer, we felt good enough in 2009 already to be able to report on scope 1, 2, and 3. We decided to put this in the incentive schemes of 15,000 managers. And guess what? Because we don't want to throw money out of the window, it took less than 1 year for the IT teams to come up with a solution to bring the climate accounting as part of management accounting. So after 1 year and then 10 years down the road, we started to issue an IFRS earning per share number adjusted by the full scope notional charge of our emissions. And I signed as CFO and CEO and then chair on those accounts. So either I'm an exception or this is where we want to go. But where it is that we need to go now is the change management within the companies to go from a situation where most of those metrics now are run by the CSO and the CSR department, and they need to come directly into the management accounting and the CFO responsibility and the investor relations. And you know, I've been there for like 20 years, and I speak to CFOs all over the place and CSOs all over the place, and for some of them have known me for 10 years, and they say, the CSO say, well, I mean, Mr. CFO has been saying Mr. No to sustainability for like the 20 last years. Do I really trust him or her in giving away what I've been doing? And the CFO is saying, I'm going to jail if I'm just using these spreadsheets and I'm saying these spreadsheets are good enough for reporting. So there is a change management here that needs to occur. And my simple recipe, and I'm speaking personally here, my simple recipe is make the change as soon as possible. By delaying the change, by allowing reliefs, you're just allowing the pain to continue. The data will become better the day they are used. And to allow the accounting and the CFO side of things to happen, and then I'll stop, I think you need to unpack a few blind spots that we've created for ourselves, and I'm speaking for me as a CFO for a long time as well, which is that, you know, I'm seeing my former colleagues saying, well, climate scenario is a forward-looking thing. You know, can I really have that as part of my remit and sign the accounts? And I'm saying, well, you've accounted for goodwill. Your terminal value in 10 years in the goodwill is like growth to perpetuity. So if you believe you can speak about growth to perpetuity, I believe that you can probably speak about a 5 or 10 years time, 10 years climate scenario. But unpacking that and not allowing those blind spots to come in the way, I think is a fundamental cultural and organizational shift, which I think is the answer to your point, which is how can we make sure that data are going to be reliable fast enough. The only way to do it is start using them now. And of course, they will be wrong for a year or two, but that's the only way that we will get that collective change.
And if I may follow up a little bit, you gave us your experience as a former CFO, CEO, and chair. What about the jurisdictional impetus that you see and momentum in order to, because that was mentioned this morning, if the EU is making a step forward, how is that going to be globalized?
Yeah. Yes, so thanks for asking that. I would say what I said earlier in my keynote. IOSCO is looking at an endorsement process that would allow jurisdictions and companies that want to use our standards to do this on their 2024 numbers or data to report in 25. So that is the objective. Again, we haven't, as a board, we haven't yet decided what will be the effective date. It will be decided, I think, in February, March, when we ballot our finance standards S1 and S2. But it's not going to be a long period before we believe our standards need to become effective. And then we will probably on some of the most, in particular in climate, and sorry to Sebastian, we are only today mostly focused on climate, although we rely a lot on other existing standards, and actually ESRS probably will be referred, or could be referred as one of them for the rest of the ESG universe overall. But we would probably bring relief. There is a paper proposed by the staff for review next week as a board that states, for instance, Scope 3, there would be a minimum 1 year of relief before they become mandatory in the package. And the second aspect I would say is beyond standard setting, I think overall, both Europe and us, and we have started some discussions, need to go for capacity building. The capacity building, the education, the training is fundamental. We cannot just set standards and just say, guys, you have an effective date and comply with it. It's absolutely essential that we support, including proportionality and scalability in many jurisdictions, which I would simply say we got unanimous vote on Scope 3 at the board level with colleagues from all over the place, Africa, Asia, etc., also because we had stated the principle that there will be capacity building and support. So that needs to occur at the same time.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Now I turn to Eelco. Your assessment of the state of play and the immediate future steps.
I see a significant mind shift within large organizations when it comes to topics on and around sustainability. And as Emmanuel already mentioned, was it in the past that the sustainability report was something like a hobby horse of a sustainability officer or chief sustainability officer? You see the shift that it's being transferred and moved towards corporate reporting and integrated in the processes of annual corporate reporting and annual reporting. And why is that important? Because in the not too past, it was often seen as a marketing gimmick. Sustainability report was something you could get away with. You promise something nice and then everyone is happy and then it's gone. However, this mind shift that occurred is that there are some large investors and also other stakeholders that hold you accountable for the information you publish. Because there are people that make decisions upon the information you provide. And you cannot provide information lightly without knowing for sure that what you provide is indeed right. So you're internal control framework and your monitoring processes around the data output of this information is of crucial importance. And the first large businesses that are currently being held accountable by investors, for example in the US, for having filed a completely GRI compliant form, but in practice basically done nothing in order to mitigate the risks that come out of that business. So also the question that we often get, so should we still take care of this now that it becomes mandatory? To me, that is sometimes a bit of a silly question. What does it matter whether something that you report is mandatory or not? If you report it, it has to be right. And what you will see is that under the influence of developments in technology, data access on sustainability will be made available more easily in the near future. And the questions we get at GRI on how to deal with this and how to deal with the risk managerial aspects and the reporting aspects are more or less the same that I got like 20 years ago when I was on the other side of the wall with the introduction of international accounting standards. It's all about frameworks, cost of compliance, and reliability of data output. So I see a positive shift in short.
Thank you. Sebastian, Kirstine, a reaction to what has been said by Emmanuel and Eelco?
Yeah, two comments maybe to Eelco. So Eelco, you said also in your speech before that companies do greenwashing and use it as a more marketing tool. I hope that holds not for every company, because then I can burn all my empirical research on that data. But that's a comment. And second, what you both said, I see that, and we also see that in our standards, because, I mean, we come from the TCFD structure, right? So, I mean, governance strategy. So now it's all in the strategy, and that's what we are aiming for also with the reporting now.
Sebastian?
A reaction on the mandatory element for the European standard. This is critical. NFRD, as from 2013, was already mandatory, CSRD as well, but it suffered a so-called comply or explain clause, which is a major loophole. Many companies did not have anything to report, so they said, well, I just explained I have nothing to report, full point. It's becoming much more difficult now with the standard, but importantly, we will have in the standard to clarify very precisely, to provide clarity to the companies, what indicators and KPIs are mandatory and what not, depending on the materiality assessment of the company, to really provide that clarity to the companies.
Yes, I would like to add that there shouldn't be any misunderstanding on ESRS 1 and 2. If it is material for the undertaking following the materiality assessment, it has to be reported. You know, it's not a pick and choose, and you know, therefore the comply or explain as interpreted, you know, what under the NFRD is gone for me, for us. And you know, it's either comply with the disclosure or comply by no disclosure when it's not material for you. So in which case, it's already an information, because when you do not comply with the disclosure, it means that you have concluded, following the materiality assessment, that it's not material for you. So it's already important for the community of users. Okay, so we'll move to the second topic, factors of successful implementation. Establishing sustainability reporting on an equal footing with financial reporting is obviously ambitious. What are, in your view, the key success factors to meet this goal? And we have identified 4 areas that we would like to quickly cover. The first one is, what are the key success factors to meet the goal in terms of global acceptance of a baseline? And we touched a little bit already, the mandatory versus voluntary disclosure regimes. So, Emmanuel.
Thank you, Patrick. So on the first part, I think that you know, the baseline can only work. It's a new language basically, and so it can only work if people find this language useful and cost-effective. And therefore it means that the demand-driven aspect of our work is fundamental. You were highlighting the very high participation in the EFRAG consultation. So we also had, at the global level, super impressive participation all over the globe from market participants about our consultation. And I think this is fundamental that we continue to engage with all of them. We have created a technical reference group to continue to engage. We have an investor advisory group to engage. More than 200 investors are part of that. We have a sustainability standards advisory forum with 15 jurisdictions that will be announced in the next couple of weeks. We have already started, I think, what has been a very precious tool, including for our discussions, a jurisdictional working group with Chiara and yourself, Patrick, and Sven and his team have participated every month, which meets now every Monday morning of the first morning of the board week. So the colleagues on the board are listening and observing that discussion of EU, US, China, Japan, UK. IOSCO is observing, and that's incredibly important for us to bring that on board while we are going to deliberate for the board week's content. So this continued engagement, I think, is fundamental. Now that we're moving in the next part of the agenda, we'll see how all of this is evolving. But this is just to share that that contribution is fundamental. I mentioned already the global or the global South capacity building that I briefly mentioned about this. We launched this at COP27 for global South countries. I think that's fundamental. And then there is the point about the proportionality and scalability that I mentioned. I think that's also very important that we are helping jurisdictions and companies to take that on board.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Eelco, a reaction on this?
It's a question we often get. Is impact reporting also to be made mandatory? I think that personal observation, it will create a more level playing field. And to add to that, as Kirsten said, perhaps I did not explain myself that well. By far, most companies that publish sustainability reports do so with all good intention and try to provide the best data that they can provide. No doubt about it. But we also know, of course, that there are some parties that do not take it that serious. And in order to create indeed that level playing field, getting a global comprehensive baseline whereby more or less the same type of standards will be made mandatory I think will greatly add to the value. Because if there is one thing where, let's call in two opposite sides perhaps, what parties need. Let's go to tax justice on the one side and let's go to BlackRock on the other side, asset manager and an activistic NGO. They all want comparable, right and proper data. So how can we secure that demand from society for all those multi-stakeholders? And I know our standards are voluntary. Many organizations are using them, also in the US. We know all about the mandate of the SEC, so let's not go there. But making it and embedding it into a regulatory framework, either by getting support from IOSCO, ESMA, local regulators, or in this case, EFRAG and the EU, is, I think, the way forward in the end.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to now introduce a second element to the question. What are, in your view, the key success factors in terms of double versus single materiality? Sébastien.
Yes. Well, as I already made clear, I mean, the double materiality for us is absolutely key. Not only in the EU, it's mandatory, but there's a reason why it's mandatory. It is because the impact reporting, as Eelco mentioned, is critical, and it is because the financial materiality reporting alone is omitting lots of critical issues. For example, Paris alignment of the business model of the company, climate science-based targets, or sustainability science-based targets, all the global development goals issues, net zero commitments, all this is not taken into account in the financial materiality reporting. So that, of course, the financial materiality reporting is necessary, but that cannot be enough. That's only one part of the picture. So we really need to have the both sides of the same coin to really provide a proper reporting, a full, complete reporting of the company towards the relevant stakeholders.
Thank you. Eelco.
It is, let me phrase it like this. Also, the question that you get, should we still report under GRI if we have ESRS and ISSB? And I often counter in boardrooms that questions with, why are you reporting under GRI right now? What's your objective for that? And then the answer is, yes, well, we had stakeholder dialogue, and many of our stakeholders want to see this information. So then the question is, if that's the case, then what does that change in your position and your view when something is introduced that is mandatory? It shouldn't when it's your strategic objective. And of course there are resources and stuff like that. But it shows also that this very topic of impacts is deemed to be very important by many stakeholders and by many businesses themselves. So if society, they elect politicians, and politicians try to translate what lives in society into legislations, if they think it is that important, then it's logic that you take this impact part also into consideration within your legal framework. So it's not only by the voluntary elements that we currently see with reporting on impacts, it is also a drive by society, apparently, that and business, and let's not forget it, all credits to large businesses. It is they that started, and it were private initiatives that started the whole, let's call it, wave on impact reporting, and not so much in the political domain. But I think that under pressure now, we will see this as necessary to be embedded in the legal frameworks.
Thank you, Eelco. A reaction, maybe, Emmanuel, because, you know, in this panel you are the person embodying the investor focus. So what is your reaction? And just a quick question following up on this, on private discussions we had, I'm sorry to disclose, but when does an impact become financially material, in your view?
Yeah, we are all about transparency, so no worries about disclosing. Yeah, I think that's a conceptually really interesting topic, and I don't want to go too much into this. It's very clear. I was listening to what Sebastian was saying earlier. You know, when we mandate Scope 3, and there is no opt-out in Scope 3 in our standards, as you said, Patrick, the same for us. If this is material you disclose, there is, okay? And then we help companies saying, this is how you can start disclosing on Scope 3 and the data tiering quality and the guidance about how to build a Scope 3 data that makes sense. So whether that is impact or not impact, I don't know. But speaking about the Paris Agreement, for instance, we actually had a reference about the Paris Agreement in saying that for companies in particular that are in Europe, referring to a climate scenario that is Paris Agreement might be extremely relevant, because if most of your emissions are in jurisdictions that are willing to comply with the Paris Agreement, then you'd better be prepared for the transition risks that is going to occur there. And so this is where I think the materiality meets, and it's hard to say because it is subject to what is significant for the company and what's not, what's meaningful for the business model and the climate, in this case, the climate resilience. So that, you know, I think there is, we spoke about the concept of dynamic materiality because we understand what matters now and here, but the space is evolving so fast that it's probably wise for us to keep an eye open on, indeed, what are going to be the next impacts that might come and, for a number of reasons, become material for companies.
Thank you for those additional comments. Now I would like to touch on, you know, the question of data collection and forward-looking information, because that has been mentioned. As compared to financial reporting, the big innovation in sustainability reporting is that we are introducing value chain. And we are also introducing forward-looking information when in financial reporting, yes, on impairment, you have to take into account, you know, the future of your cash flows and perpetual, the terminal values, etc. You mentioned it, Emmanuel. But nevertheless, it's less systemic than in sustainability reporting. So how do you foresee, Kirstine, to start with, the challenge for companies to collect data, and what are the safeguards that we can introduce without impairing the quality of information on both value chain and forward-looking information?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we touched upon that. You said that already, and Emmanuel, you said, I mean, having information is better than no information, and having maybe not the correct information right now is also better than no information, and I completely agree with that. And Patrick, you also said that. I mean, we are used to work with assumptions in financial reporting, so why not using it in sustainability reporting? And if you think of what we cover in sustainability topics, I mean, most of them are related to actions we take now, but effects that we see in the future. So we need these assumptions to go into future information and into forward-looking information. Of course, now we talk about then, as we did in financial reporting, talking about relevance and reliability. So, you know, the same questions evolve here. But as said, coming from sustainability topics, I think it's very important to include these assumptions. And yeah, people will work with that. And also, I mean, in science, that's what we do, right? We take assumptions and we work with the data, and that's the same.
And if I can follow up, yeah. In terms of assurance, this is a key topic because, you know, in auditing, of course, auditors prefer certainty. It's easier to be certain about the past than about the future. So, and there is the crucial question that the IASB will address of, you know, the relationship between the assurance that is provided and the suitable criteria on which such assurance will be based. So, any reaction about that?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I also worked in an audit company, so I know that reliable data is better if there are no assumptions. But a world without assumptions is maybe a world of the past, but not of the future, and that's what I already said. So we are looking into the future. And also auditors have to deal with that right now. We were talking about impairments, so auditors know how to deal with that. I mean, it depends on the assumption you take, right? Are the assumptions somehow reliable? They cannot be reliable for 10 years, but for 1, 2, or 3 years, and then we will see.
Okay, thank you. Emmanuel?
I would maintain what I said.
Surprise.
Yeah, well.
What a surprise.
You mentioned goodwill, and I agree that, because I've done that in the past, you know, projecting a perpetual growth or growth to perpetuity of cash flow 10 years from now to perpetuity seems to me a pretty ambitious task, and yet we've signed accounts where you have billions of goodwills and sometimes dozens of billions of goodwill, which is, you know, the majority sometimes of even.
Are you talking about the panel this afternoon?
No. I'm talking about whether I'm talking about whether there is a difference between accounting, backward-looking, so-called, and what we are discussing, which is probably more about forward-looking. And I'm saying I'm back on this goodwill thing. I could speak about pension liabilities. I mean, I remember the days I was CFOs and there was no, in France at least, there was no pension liability. They were off balance sheet. Suddenly we bring them in the balance sheet. There's not been any difference in the valuation of companies, but simply the level of attention that was paid to it. And that's basically, I mean, that's basically somewhere, you know, a calculation where you're making an assumption on the average lifetime of your former employees. Well, do you have control on that, my friends? No, you don't.
I hope not.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't. Stock options, huge topic for, you know, executive committees and boards. Stock option valuation. You must bet on your own valuation by the market in the future. So come on. I mean, the whole of accounting is about estimates and about forward-looking statements. But the reason we believe that and we are comfortable in signing those accounts is because we have very, very robust tested processes, internal controls that filters all this data into something that we basically feel that works. And there's comparability. Of course, as a pension, you know, on your pension funds, you can compare the whole industry, and you've got a whole industry now that is working on detailing what assumptions you can or you should use. So you have got this development of external bodies that are supporting this and makes audit committees and risk committees, you know, comfortable with that. I've been sitting on the audit committee as the financial expert of probably what's the biggest market capitalization in the airline industry now. For 3 years, and I can tell you we had Japanese operation leases, we had jet fuels options. I mean, all of this. I mean, do you want to make a judgment on what the oil price is going to be in 2 years from now? I mean, so this is what this population has been dealing with successfully. Why wouldn't we be able to do the same for you know, sustainability standards? The thing is, in the first years, it will not be there. We will gradually use this, and over time, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time, there will be these processes. But the sooner we embed all of this into these processes, and the better the result will be. So I'm sticking with my position.
Okay. Being an optimist myself, I like your optimism. But I would like to point out that I think, nevertheless, that it's a bridge slightly further. Because, you know, when you are to account for, you know, the future consequences of past decisions, it's a bridge further to account for scenarios including future decisions. Mm-hmm. So that's where, by the way, it's a topic that we are going to, I hope, to explore together. Because, you know, we need to fine-tune the conceptual thinking about that. So that's a personal view.
I mean, Andreas is there, so he's much more qualified than me to discuss that.
I was looking at Andreas.
But indeed, I mean, and there is a clear rule in accounting about the recognition of decisions. What is a decision and what is not. And for me, this is much more that particular aspect, I agree with you, Patrick, than the forward-looking nature of what we're going to discuss.
Thank you. You know, fuel for thought for all of us, I believe. We are not going to bring this conversation to an end with a final conclusion, I'm sure. A quick word about education and capacity building and resources, Sébastien.
Yeah, maybe 2 points on this. There will be more capacity and resources needed in many companies to do double materiality reporting properly. At the same time, there's a huge benefit of having a granular standard as the SRS in Europe, because it streamlines the information and it makes it very, very clear for companies what they should report on or not, and what is really the most strategic and meaningful. While today, as I mentioned, there's lots of noise already in data reporting, meaning that it might be burdensome to report or costly, but it's not really meaningful and strategic, and sometimes it's just totally useless. So that will help a lot the companies to report in a more meaningful way, and that will cut a lot the burden and the cost of the reporting. And one other element, which is the importance I already mentioned of increasing reporting on forward-looking information. All the climate transition, all the green transition towards zero-carbon sustainable business models is about forward-looking information, notably in the form of corporate targets set by companies and corporate transition plans explaining how the targets will be achieved. This is all about forward-looking information. Companies will have to become more familiar with, for example, for the climate space, forward-looking climate scenario analysis, sector-specific decarbonization pathways to ensure the business model of the company will gradually align with such pathways. This is just unavoidable, and I really clearly see a growing demand from investors in particular, willing to compare the companies in terms of their trajectories towards net zero, and being able to assess whether the company is going to align with the Paris Agreement or is going in effect to contribute to derail the Paris Agreement.
Thank you, Sébastien. I don't want to reiterate the call made by Hans in terms of resources. We all know that we are stretched, but by not making it, I make it. So, you know, it's like painting. When you paint, you need 3 coats of paint. So you say that you are going to say it, you say that you have said it, and you said that you, and you say it again. So, Kerstin, as an academic, should we be optimistic about resources to address this new paradigm of sustainability reporting, which is going to be extremely important for all of us?
Yes, of course, and I'm sitting at the source, I would say, right? I educate young people, and I will, of course, do that, but I think that's not what you're referring to, Patrick. So, yeah, we talked about that issue a couple of times with, Patrick was in the board, right, with our fellow board members, and we said we need these resources on one hand, and the education, of course, on the other hand. I mean, you cannot do all at the same time, right? So we had a lot of time pressure. I mean, we were preparing already some resources, but in terms of education, I think there must be, or we have to come up with a lot of more things, and that's to us, Patrick, to the board, right? We have to give more guidance to the companies, because if you see what companies are right now struggling with, at least what I see is that they're somehow a little bit left alone with the taxonomy, and we don't want that being the same for our standards, Patrick. So I think we should be the one from our EFRAG perspective with more resources. To give guidance and to educate more. I think it's also on us to do that.
Yes, you're right. I can say that we're discussing with Chiara Del Prete at the moment the idea of having, you know, a series of modules that would be available on our website, short, like 20, 30 minutes, for the key standards, for all standards, that would be educational. Without, by the way, interfering, because I see a question on the screen, with the process that the Commission is going to go through. Because, you know, yes, we deliver technical advice, so I answer to the question by the same token. And of course, the process might introduce some changes. Sven might want to chip in, but I understand that it's not the willingness is not to reopen the discussion on the standards. There might be adjustments along the road following the consultation with the public authorities, following the public consultation that the Commission will organize. So, yeah, there could be changes, but we hope that there will be, yeah. Sven, you don't see him, but I'm just saying, showing what he says. So minimal, if I say. That's the hope. So answering that question. So thank you. Second theme was covered. Thanks a lot. Challenges of interoperability. We touched a little bit on that. Of course, there's something we hate. It's multiple reporting. Because, you know, users are lost and preparers are lost. And that's one, by the way, of the key challenges today, because businesses receive an exponential number of questionnaires that are coming from rating agencies, investors, NGOs, and they're all those questionnaires are drafted in a different way and on the basis of different requests. So anyway, today, the idea of having multiple reportings is already existing. So, mapping interoperability tables are considered as a key tool in that respect. So is multi-tagging when reporting under a digital format. How do you set the current level of potential interoperability between the key initiatives? And Kerstin, you have been in charge of, you know, making sure that we were onboarding GRI, ISSB to the maximum extent possible. So your assessment today?
Yeah, I think we did very well, of course. Yeah, no, we did, and we always talk to you guys, right? You know that, and we still talk, and that's the main part. I think, especially with E1, and S2, Emmanuel, we had a lot of discussions, and also with the people or the team from Sven, and I think we did a huge effort regarding that. But the main point is that we keep that up with future work that we do. So my assessment, it's pretty good, and Sven told me already that they will still work on it, and that they will move on with that.
So would you say, based on what we know so far, because the deliberations are not finalized at ISSB level, mission accomplished? In other words, people complying with the ESRS would, broadly speaking, I'm prudent, be complying with ISSB expectations? That's a tricky question.
Yes, I have to look to my left to answer that question. But I would say we have done all that was possible from our end until we delivered it. Now it's up to Sven.
Okay. You know, very clever, Kirsten.
No, we really.
I will remember that.
Yeah. Yes. It's always good to give it to the left or to the right. Yes. No, I think, and you have been also part of it, right? We did a lot of discussions, and Chiara was also there. I mean, we did to the maximum extent possible. That's what I can say. And from my perspective, of course, we did great. I mean, what should I say?
And as regards GRI?
To me?
Yeah.
Yeah, also.
Further left.
Well, we included that, right? So,
Yes.
and we also took into account you commented on our standards, right? On the draft standards, and we took that also into account. And yeah, we did.
We were not easy to please.
No, that's true.
No, I remember vividly an 80-page document released in April.
That was the summary.
And that was a summary. But that was helpful. Maybe not in communication terms, but certainly in substance. Okay, so Eelco, you are next. Interoperability. How would you assess?
It is of crucial importance to get indeed to this global baseline and to ease compliance, reduce cost of compliance, make things comparable, and it just needs a lot of goodwill between parties to move on the road that we've chosen to go on. And frankly, there is no alternative than what we are currently doing. And that is interoperability and close cooperation between, indeed, the EFRAG, the ISSB, and GRI to bring this forward. What would be your alternative if this would fail? It would be a disaster with a swamp of incomparable data, multi-reporting frameworks. And one thing I would like to add why this is so important, what we're currently doing, it will also perhaps curb the sometimes a bit opaque methodologies of rating agencies that have a tremendous power in investment decisions, but sometimes we have no clue on what basis they rate certain companies. So controlling and auditing is comparing to a standard. So if we have this global standard that is as much aligned as or interoperable as possible, then it will be far more easy to also assess the quality of rating agencies' methodologies and the way how they assess certain businesses, which is something that is often forgotten in the whole debate.
I see two questions. I take this opportunity because I see two questions on the screen coming from the Slido system, I believe. Is GRI fully compatible with the ESRS? If yes, does that mean that a company that reports according to GRI standards can claim compliance with ESRS standards? Question one. The other one being, what is the future of GRI reporting in EU companies? Will they report on GRI and ESRS? Only ESRS GRI? Why should a company report with GRI in 2024 plus?
Yeah, well, that is not one question. And I would like to turn it around. How much is ESRS aligned to GRI? We're a bit broader, but the DNA of GRI is now in ESRS. And the question, if you want to be using a GRI or not, if you work with the GRI standards and your control and reporting framework has been built around that one, it will serve you also to do the ESRS. GRI standards are on topics a bit broader. There are more than ESRS currently have. And there are very good reasons why businesses on a global scale use our standards to report on their impacts. So then the introduction of a mandatory statement is then more a question about compliance and willingness to do more than just what is legally obliged than something else, and that's a boardroom decision. Looking forward on our, let's call it our memorandum of understanding and joint work with the ISSB, that is also on a global scale, and that is more than only the EU. Although, of course, we hope that the rest of the world will follow the EU example and introduce mandatory double materiality reporting. But you can then also say the same, and I pass that one to Emmanuel. It's double materiality. It's both financial and on impact. So if this question counts for GRI, the same also accounts for ISSB, as long as it has not been made mandatory in certain jurisdictions. So why should I use ISSB if we have ESRS as mandatory? And somehow that question you never get. You get always the question on GRI, but never on ISSB.
Okay. so yeah. That's real fine, because, you know, I'm going to ask the question to Emmanuel. You know, Kirsten turned to you just a couple of minutes ago. So what is your assessment in terms of interoperability and the way forward? You mentioned it already, but what is the current assessment?
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. I think that if you look back about a year ago, I remember COP26, the prototype of S1 and S2 shared by the IFRS Foundation, and the webinar that was organized by Europe, where a few of yourselves and colleagues were on panel sharing also a prototype. There were, I think, huge concerns in this room and probably many places elsewhere that we would ever be able to have established a dialogue in the time and space that was dictated by the calendar of the EU work, and EU had started before. So I think, as I said briefly during my keynote this morning, the clarification of the game, in a way, by the CSRD draft on the 27th of June, and the results of our consultation late July allowed us to work something that is close to a miracle, which is that within that super compressed time frame, we completely rebuild the strategy of redeliberation to be able to address all the fundamental points of that interoperability on S1 and S2 on our side, with essentially E1 and ESRS 1 and 2 on the European side in a matter of, I don't know, 8 or 10 weeks. Looking at where I think we are right now, I think we are heading towards what can be a true interoperability between the two standards. As Kirsten said, there is the incredible work that you did and the EFRAG colleagues did to the technical advice. Now it's Sven and his team. And we will continue to work in the next couple of weeks, 2 months maybe, whatever, that are available to finalize this work, because the worst thing is to be inspired by or close to. I mean, that's really the worst thing you want. So we want to have an extremely precise interoperability table on which both, I think we are maybe 90% there, but there's still a bit of work to be done so that we can really clarify what is together, what is on both sides or not. based on where we are, by the way, so this is really talking about S1 and S2 on our side. We've got nothing more at this stage. And on that basis, it will only work if we design a user's guide to go from the ESRS to the corresponding ISSB standards and to go from the ISSB corresponding standards to the ESRS standards through that table and the proper use of that table. And this is what will be a true interoperability and I think a true achievement from the European side as well, because you would have created the first ever building block on S1 and on climate of the global baseline. And, I've already heard the day before yesterday, Sean Berrigan at the Financial Stability Board saying that he would now look forward to many jurisdictions also establish this interoperability with the global baseline. So maybe in 2 months' time, that's where we are. And I think there is a very distinct possibility that's the case. Now, the next stage indeed is our intent would be obviously that we grow that interoperability table to the next phases of the EFRAG's work and of course our work, which shows things like digital taxonomy, and I think we should bring GRI in. Industry-based standards, I think we should also have GRI in, but work with you as you are establishing your 23-26 program on this. And as you know, we have a very significant chunk of industry-based standards that are coming. We are also now going to look at natural ecosystems, biodiversity and water, just transition. So we can embark and check what you have done and how that fits. And it will be for us, EFRAG, to adjust one way or the other to try to ensure the intent is that as much as for climate, we can bring 90% maybe of that. And sometimes for whatever reason, we won't be able. But that logic of having a precise, updated and growing interoperability section, I think is fundamental. And I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Sebastian, on interoperability
yes.
as a user.
Well, we strongly support interoperability because that's more consistent and that's reducing the burden. But there are 2 conditions in our view. The first condition is that it must not be at the expense of the double materiality. We already discussed this. The ISSB scope is only one part of the ESRS scope, which is broader. So we need to make sure they work together, but not at the expense of the double materiality approach. We're already hearing some conservative stakeholders using the ISSB as a sort of pretext to weaken the ESRS and the double materiality approach, which we think is very wrong. And there's a second condition on the timeline. Because, we have a nice discussion here and we have good jokes, but at the same time, we know the sustainability challenges we face are desperately urgent. We are off track, and we need to accelerate the transition. So the interoperability must not be a reason to postpone any standard by years, just to make sure we have one perfect global standard before we can start doing anything. We need to start extremely quickly, and notably the ESRS should not be weakened, should not be postponed, should not be sequenced with approaches such as, let's do climate first, and for the rest we'll see later. This would not be acceptable in our view. Because let's do not forget, reporting is only a means to an end. So corporate reporting is a tool that then will have to be used by companies, by shareholders, by banks, etc., to make sure business models of companies are transitioning to sustainable business models. Stop doing harm, transition, increase contributions to sustainability goals, etc. And that's the very aim, as Eelco mentioned, that's the very aim ultimately of sustainability reporting. It's just not reporting for reporting. And the urgency of the situation must not be forgotten with other elements which are important as well, like interoperability, but we need to find a good balance for all of this.
Thank you, Sebastian. I see time moving fast. Well, we started 6 minutes late, so I am an accountant by training. So I propose the following. We have a few questions that we can address quickly, and then each of the panelists will have a 1-minute takeaway message to share with the audience. So, having a look at the questions. Well, there are questions related to independent assurance, the role of the Big Four, and other, technical auditing firms. This is clearly, I should say, this is not in EFRAG's remit. So I'm sorry, I cannot bring much, or we cannot bring much on this one. This is certainly, as a former senior partner of an audit firm, I have a view, but I will not share this view with the audience today. The other ones, I think we addressed. Are there any efforts to align towards a single group of international sustainability standards? ESRS, recognized as international standards, wonderful. TCFD, well, TCFD was an inspiration for all of us. I think we can say that. That was the starting point. It gets very confusing for businesses. I think that the answer lies into the discussion we had on interoperability, quite frankly. The WEF keeps ranking biodiversity loss as top 3 global risk, but bulk of US and EU nature risks and impacts are upstream though. Why limit scope 3 to climate?
We are not.
We are not.
No. Yeah.
So, well, for biodiversity, we'll see what you say, what you do.
No, sorry. S1 for us, so the foundational IFRS
yes,
S1
you're right.
says full value chain, no exception, no opt-out. And what is true for climate is already by definition true for any ESG topic or sustainability topic, the way you want to call it. So I don't know what will be the scope 3 for biodiversity, but obviously that will be in the value chains, no doubt. Yeah.
And of course it's foundational for ESRS. So, and for GRI.
We just published our draft biodiversity standard, so have a look at that one.
And by the way, TNFD has recommended that climate scenario should also have a mirror in nature scenario because of the interrelated factors for water, deforestation, etc. So, yeah, scope 3 is a notion for greenhouse gas emissions, but it's one for any ESG topic.
Okay. Does a European daughter company based in Europe have comply with the CSRD in 2025? If it is a large company, the answer is yes. And again, in 2028 for the non-European parent double reporting. Sven? I'm sorry? It depends on the size, yes. Okay.
Large companies, yes.
Large companies, yes.
The European daughter company.
And last but not least, are you also linking to the developments regarding sustainability reporting requirements in the US? That's a point we have not covered. So we are carefully monitoring the evolution of the SEC proposal, I would say. We don't have the final decision making. We understand that, first of all, it's addressing a different population because we're talking about listed companies. 2, it has to be in the mandate of the SEC, so that creates a number of, limitations. And 3, there is a big discussion about scope 3, if I understand well. So we don't know yet. Emmanuel, you have a view?
No comment on the substance, but on the process, obviously, where we go with interoperability between the ISSB and the EU is going to inform other jurisdictions' progress on that topic. And the next chapter, probably in terms of priority engagement for us, as we hopefully complete our interoperability agreement with your standards, is going to be the US, and so first quarter next year.
Thank you. Now we're going to move to the 1-minute takeaway message, starting with you, Emmanuel.
I've said a lot, so
recap.
Yeah. I really believe that what we have achieved so far on interoperability is critical. I think that the pragmatism with which both our teams have engaged was critical to get where we are, and I really hope that it will, and I'm trusting that it will continue in the next couple of months. This is, you know, in many ways, that's a gift to European citizens, and it's a gift to the global capital markets. I truly believe that a well-functioning capital market is what we need to fund the urgent revamping and evolution towards a more resilient economic model for companies to continue to thrive. I personally believe that climate change will reshape entire pieces of competitive advantage, both for countries and for companies. And what we are trying to do together, I think, is to bring clarity and transparency on what these new elements of the competitive advantage that companies would need to look at in terms of managing their impacts, the regeneration of the capitals that they are putting at work behind the financial value creation is fundamental. So thanks for leading the charge to you here in EU, and we are really happy to continue working together in contributing to the global baseline.
Eelco, your 1 minute takeaway.
Yeah, well, first of all, I know you guys now for 1 year, but it feels like 10. I don't know if it's good or not, but we've done it. We've really done a lot. Now, I would like to stress that it's not really about the reporting itself, but it's what behind it, and it offers a myriad of business opportunities, because we're not discussing like just the introduction of a new report. We are discussing the transformation of a business model, of an economic model on a global scale, whereby impacts and different ways of working, value chains and supply chains are at stake. So it's massive. And it's not only that we need to train and educate and do capacity building around the mere auditing. It's also all the supporting activities we need to make this a healthier, happier planet, and to change those production processes in a more sustainable way. That's what behind it, and we must never forget that.
Kerstin?
Yeah, to build on that, we need everybody to support and also to attend this transformation. And I feel like, I mean, not in this room and also not for the virtual people here, so we should spread the word about that, what we did and what we have done so far, so that everybody gets it. I think also company-wise, because we need everybody, as said, also from the data perspective, to attend this transformation. And yeah, my second point is be more active and stay more active, I should say. So we are moving fast. We already started the set 2, so sector-specific standards. So try to engage. We have a multi-stakeholder approach. So yeah, as I said before, so try to engage with us and look up what we are doing, because we are really fast, as Eelco already said.
Thank you, Kerstin. Sébastien.
Yeah, few points. The ESRS draft set 1, we think, is a significant step forward. We hope the Commission is not going to reopen and rediscuss every single thing, because it was already achieved as a compromise between meaningfulness and usability. So we think that it really works like this, and it's balanced, and we don't have time to wait by rediscussing every nitty-gritty issues. We need to move forward. At the same time, ESRS Set 1 is only a first step, as mentioned. Sector-specific standards, with, in our view, some needed mandatory KPIs are necessary, and they will come down the road, with also an SME standard. So there's more to come to go with more granular sustainability reporting. And finally, the double materiality element is critical. The EFRAG made lots of work to integrate elements from the ISSB, from the GRI, make things work properly, as smoothly as possible. Of course, there must be reciprocity with ISSB and GRI also making efforts to ensure interoperability, and to make sure the double material will cover both the work of the ISSB, the work of GRI, and both are contributing to feed the ESRS in a consistent way.
Thank you very much. So it's time to conclude. I see Hans, looking at me. So I hope you found this panel very interesting, and I would like to thank the panelists. If you wish, I would like you to join me in a round of applause to thank them. Merci.
Ladies and gentlemen, indeed, thank you very much to this extraordinary panel. Thank you, Patrick, Kirsten, Sébastien, Emmanuel, and Eelco. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not stopping. There's no break now. We need to continue a little bit. Come on. Well, you must have realized by now that EFRAG is, next to being a body and a core advisor to the European Commission, is also a family. I mean, Eelco referred to it very, very, very clearly. That is that after 1 year, it feels like 10 years. I told my colleague Nicolas that's very simple. That's because everybody runs double shifts, so the time goes quicker. May I invite you for the next panel? And I'm proud to announce the panel is going to be coordinated by Saskia Slomp, and I'm going to be very honest with you. Introducing Saskia is on the one hand side extremely difficult, and on the other hand side it is extremely easy. Saskia for me is very easy. She takes care of EFRAG. And it has always been so, it has so been for years, and it still continues like this. God knows what would happen to us if she would not be there. Well, the following session is going to be about looking backwards and forward at EFRAG. Saskia is going to introduce the panel, but of course there is no secret. Most of you must have recognized the founders of EFRAG, amongst others Françoise Flores, Stig Ernevelsen, and of course the person that is doubling jobs all the time and still getting there on time is Chiara Del Prete. Thank you very much, Saskia. The floor is yours.
Yeah, okay, great. So, like Hans is saying, we thought we also should have a panel about looking forward and backwards. And you see here we're also helping sustainability because we are helping to the gender balance of this conference. Being 3 women here, we only had Kirsten and sorry Steve on the screen. So this afternoon we will do a little bit better on financial reporting. But yeah, all the big bosses. I'm not going to finish. So let me first let me start with the bios of Stig. By the way, they are on the website, so we're not going to do them in detail. So we will come back to all the roles of Stig in EFRAG. But Stig was a retired partner from Deloitte, but he has also been active in Accountancy Europe. He was the vice chair of the Corporate Reporting Policy Group, and he has been active in the Norwegian Financial Supervisory Authority. He was actually the chairman of their advisory forum. Don't know why he ended up there, but that's not for today. So then we have Françoise, who you all know. So her last role before retiring was ISSB board member, so very, very prestigious. Come back to her long history in EFRAG, but Françoise was also before at Massa, and then she actually was technical advisor to Actio and to Business Europe. And actually that's where Françoise and I met for the first time. So then my colleague, Chiara, with us today, and like Hans is saying, she has a double role at the moment, both being the chair of the Financial Reporting TAC and the acting chair of the Sustainability Reporting Chair. But what some of you may not know, that we have been colleagues before, because Chiara worked with us, with Françoise and me, as project manager. In between, she is head of accounting of UniCredit, and she was a partner at Massa. So that's so far the introduction. If you want to read more, it's on the bios on the website. So what is interesting, I was looking back and doing a little bit of calculations like we have to do. We are covering sort of altogether 16 out of 21 years of EFRAG. Before, the first chair of EFRAG, of the tech chair, because we only had a tech when we started, and a supervisory board, was Johan van Helleman. Then we had Stig, then Françoise, come back to that, and then Andrew Watchman for 3 years, and then Chiara. So we're missing out only on these years. So Stig, he joined from the beginning as a member, and then became the chair from 2004 to 2010. And like Hans was saying, he is never really away. We are now just wondering when he is coming back, actually. He has been in several groups and lately on the board, on the financial reporting board and on the admin board. So he has been everywhere where he could be. So Steve, we are just waiting when you are coming back, and because you seem to be somebody who is never retiring. Françoise has a long, long history because in 2004 she started as vice chair with Steve. As member first, and then at some stage vice chair at least. This is all from my memory. And then, of course, 6 years as the chair. So Chiara joined in 2019. Then you have to know that the governance model of EFRAG has changed. I think Hans referred to that a couple of times. So in the very beginning, the role of the tech chair and the CEO was separated. We had Paul Rutteman as the CEO. Then they were combined under Steve. And we had then the supervisory board, of course, from the beginning as well. Jørgen Tidström, who unfortunately cannot be here today. That would be really great because it's really Jørgen who established from the basis. We started 1999 with the creation of EFRAG. Then we had the Maestad reform, which was, of course, very, very important to us because that created the new role of the board. So the supervisory board was gone. We got a board, a decision-making board, and an advisory tech. And also very important, it brought the European good perspective to being assigned to EFRAG, so that we had an important role there. So from 2014, the last quarter, we had a Buysse board and a tech. And then, of course, I don't have to go because you all discussed that, the new role of EFRAG recently with the technical advice on the ESRS. And now we have 3 boards. So an administrative board, sort of the board of directors, doing perhaps also what the supervisory board did before, financial reporting board, and a sustainability reporting board. So Chiara and I are facing actually 3 bosses instead of 1. So, so we are looking forward to the improvement. And we have 2 tags. So we have a financial reporting tag and a sustainability reporting tag. And Chiara is doing Buysse at the moment. So today we really want, with all these people here, to look and to benefit from their wisdom and experience. And if you have questions, particular questions or remarks you want to make, then please use your app, and then we'll see on the screen and we will address them. So when we prepared for this panel discussion, sort of we haven't decided on a couple of questions, but we also had a lot of memories and different memories, and we discussed, so it was actually quite fun to catch up. So the first thing that we would like to address, and Steve, I'm going to start with you. I don't know for the techniques how that works, but so if after what I said, Steve could be able to speak. So the first question that we discussed was, what do you see as the most remarkable and significant moment in the time that you were the chair? What's your biggest achievement, and what could have perhaps gone better? And what are the biggest changes you saw? So Steve, you can start. We go chronologically this time.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me, and I apologize for not being able to participate in person, but it would also have disturbed the balance of the ladies at the top table. You know, if I look back, and this is a looking back, when I listened to the former panel, it was very much, lively about the recent developments and the future. But I think if I look back, one of the very important features in the first 10 years of EFRAG's existence was that we decided in 2001 to go fully via the internet and not to print any papers. Remind you, that was very brave back in 2001, relatively early days of the internet. One reason, of course, we did not mention and do not mention is that we didn't have any money to actually print everything, and it would be distributed, etc., etc. In addition, we decided very early to issue draft comment letters and draft endorsement advice letters. First, of course, we issued them to get input from our constituents, so they had the possibility to give us advice on how we should advise. However, many ISB respondents used our draft comment letters as basis for their own comment letters. And after a few years, it was a very powerful tool to get influence vis-à-vis the ISB, because our letters were used all over the world. We also decided quite early to be a technical high-quality player in the game. ISB and others would only listen to our comments if they were of high quality. The same goes for a standard setter, the EFRAG standard setting leg. It only gets respect and accept if the work is high quality, and it's important both for the financial side and for the sustainability side. We also decided to be open and transparent and listen carefully to the comments we receive from commentators. That is important. I think a very big achievement in the first 10 years was to make EFRAG important. From unknown little brother in 2001 to the most important European voice on reporting and the only pan-European voice. There were national voices, but not a proper pan-European voice. And a significant change over the 10 years was to, 9 years, 6 years or whatever, was to have, we started with 3 borrowed offices and no staff. And then we moved to the very smart offices that EFRAG still has today, even though I understand you now change the colors. Since 2010, a major change was also to convince Saskia to join EFRAG, and I am happy that she is still a robust anchor in development of EFRAG. And Françoise was a major improvement when she took over as chairman for me to professionalize EFRAG. Later, the change was the Maestad reform, which made EFRAG a much more political body and with a step backwards in relation to governance. However, the governance matter was corrected, or whatever you may call it, when the recent change to EFRAG with the 2 pillars were instituted, because then you have the 2 boards and then you have oversight, you have the admin board with the oversight and appointment responsibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve, and it's good that you do. He will come back on the next questions, but I just wanted to say it's good that you can't see my office, because I feel really bad when you talk about paperless work. It's not anything close to that.
It has never been your style.
But it's also very interesting to learn that actually you are the generator of this draft comment letter and comment letter process, which is quite unique. Well, it was, I think, quite unique in the world, but now I see a number of standard setters. Actually, I see the German standard setter doing the same, but also the UK endorsement board is following this, this route as well. So you're famous, or at least your ideas are famous. François, same question for you. What are the achievements? What could have come better, and what do you see as the main developments in this period?
Well, good afternoon, everyone,
and
thank you for having me here.
I think it works, yeah.
Is that working? Thank you. It feels overwhelming, in fact, a lot of emotions to see how EFRAG has grown and the importance it's taken. And following up first, I mean, from what Steve just said, I think indeed the Maestad reform has brought this political dimension to EFRAG that it didn't have before. And when I see EFRAG today, I think that this reform has allowed the next one to come. And the present EFRAG is what we see, and that is so impressive. So going back, and you know, having said that, I mean, whatever contribution were made at the time make me feel very humble, in fact, because it was a small piece seen in a very big puzzle today. So just to bring the context in 2010, when I joined as chairman, in fact, it was the time when EFRAG had to issue and every stakeholder was also in the same challenge of reviewing whatever the ISB and also the FISB together had to propose in the mainstream of standards, being revenue recognition, leases, and also IFRS 9 being revisited, and also the FISB revisiting their financial instruments standards. So a period in which the stream of work was important, not only in number, but also in importance. The stakes of what was being considered were important. Of course, the draft comment letter, the genial draft comment letter were used, and I can really confirm what Steve said. I mean, they have been of terrific influence in what EFRAG has achieved. But at the time, previously, the work of EFRAG in that time would stop after having issued the draft comment letter, and EFRAG would work again on a standard candidate only after the ISB would have published it. And in between, EFRAG would be silent, and EFRAG would not have any contact with its stakeholders. So what we did, being very sensitive to the stakes, we wanted to keep active while the ISB and FISB at the time also were deliberating. So we decided to, in fact, I remember turning to the supervisory board and saying, well, now that we've done that, what can we do? What are your ideas of what we could do? And the response I got was, make noise. It was also my view that we really had to reach out to our stakeholders as much as we could in order to increase the relevance of whatever debates we had. So in fact, in that period, we developed a number of other tools of EFRAG, one being our outreach capability. And we did that in very strong coordination with the national standard setter. Everyone standard setter who wanted to participate was most welcome. And also we specified and started implementing our field test policy. To us, it was not just enough to assess from a technical perspective and a bit abstractly the relevance, the qualities of financial reporting that would result from a particular standard. It was also important to test the feasibility and gather some input also as to the cost of implementation, so as to fulfill, you know, the test of whether the reasonable cost would be met. And so that's probably the main achievements that were started at the time and that were prolonged throughout the chairmanship. It's also always difficult to select just one thing, because I think it has been also a time, and in pursuance, in fact, of what Steve had launched, cooperation with the national standard setters in the research phase, where Steve had launched with them a number of very significant projects, and where at this stage of the development of EFRAG, we also added another leg, which was to produce smaller, more restricted documents, research elements that were very much up to date with the deliberations and the agenda of the board, instead of being only upstream. And that also helped gaining influence on the ISB.
Okay. Thank you, Françoise. I think you should not be humble because outreaches, field testing is still something that is very at the heart of the activities that we do. So you can be very proud that you introduced that at the time. Looking at Chiara more recently, you want to give your perspective of what went well, what could have gone better, and what do you see as main developments during the period that, well, it's now nearly 4 years that you have this role. And perhaps if you want to say some of about your double role, you're very happy to do that as well.
No, I mean, we are here to focus on, on financial reporting. So talking about achievements, the obvious reference is the endorsement of IFRS 17. And Françoise mentioned the establishment of the field tests and the outreaches, and of course we leveraged on all those procedures with what has been a sort of real test of the structure in an important case, which was the endorsement of a standard that is reshaping and modernizing the communication, the financial communication for a key industry that is very relevant in terms of being the reference for institutional investors. So we involved 75, I mean, the total of the people that, the insurers that participated to our field test represented 75% of the total industry, total assets in Europe. So it was an intense dialogue and talking about influencing the IASB. EFRAG was instrumental, together with other stakeholders that had the same point of view in the IASB, reopening the deliberations of the standard very late in the process, something that was unprecedented and very much welcomed by us and by many stakeholders, and managed to solve actually all the concerns, which were very many, of the industry except one. So this, I think, is something that is worth mentioning for the complexity and the highly contentious nature of some topics. Then next to it, I would like to mention, in terms of achievements, the completion of the research program, with in particular two topics, crypto assets and intangibles, that contributed to reinforce the role of EFRAG in thought leadership outside the narrow circle of simply the accountants that follow very loyally our work. With crypto assets, we have addressed an asset class with a growing momentum. When the decision was made in 2018 to start the project, it wasn't obvious that it would have had such a big market development, and now it's likely to become mainstream investments, and still we see very recently problems with the absence of regulation in that field. So cryptocurrencies and other crypto assets, there is lack of specific accounting rules. So our discussion paper, I think, has contributed significantly in demystifying the topic, and we hope it will also support the work of the IASB, not directly in a project, because we know there will be not a project on it, but probably the IASB may have a look at it as part of the intangible project. And in any case, all other standard setters internationally are working currently or have been working on that topic. The other discussion paper on the research is, of course, a discussion paper on intangibles. Again, one of these big suspects for financial reporting losing its relevance is often mentioned. So it's the lack of better information on intangibles for companies to explain how they create and maintain value. And this led us to explore very closely the intricacies, the borders between sustainability reporting and financial reporting, with a project and a discussion paper that had a very big return and success in terms of letters that we got, but also richness of the feedback that we got from the different categories, valuators, investors, etc. And with a panel of experts that has been created for the project and will continue to advise EFRAG in its next project on connectivity between financial and sustainability reporting. Looking at the big changes, and then I've completed, I would like to mention the fact that EFRAG turned all its activity overnight in mid-March or around the 20 March 2020 virtual. So due to the pandemic, we never had a full virtual meeting before. From the day to the night, we were all working remotely. So I think there has been a huge and tremendous change in the way EFRAG interacts. It's visible outside, the use we do in technology, the facility that we get to go out from Brussels office and be everywhere, do all these outreaches. I mean, it has been really a game changer in the capacity to reach out and get and be efficient in the discussion that we have. I mean, I couldn't think now in a world in working without this. Well, the last thing that I would like to mention then is the co-branded outreach programs with the IASB for major projects. I think this is also a big achievement in continuity with the work started by Stig and Françoise and the others before me. But it's really good to see the way that we cooperate in continuity. We approach jointly the stakeholders, the IASB staff and board members are regularly speaking in all our outreach events. So it's a nice attitude that I'm proud to see so stable and promising also for the future.
Thank you, Chiara. So Chiara has illustrated how we build basically on all the work done by Stig and by Françoise. And I think we should also say that under Françoise, this research work actually started or got a boost because we started to get the funding of the Commission. We have to, in each panel, we have to say the word funding and money. So, but that allowed us to increase substantially the staff. So, so that research work we could start then, and Chiara is referring to it, that we now actually, it's a very good means as well to have the international discussions and to influence the ISB. Well, the next question we have asked to the three panelists is actually, can you tell us an anecdote? What is sort of happening during your period that you want to share with us as a lighter element to it? So, Stig, you have now been silent for a while, so we give the floor again to you. Yeah, it's a bit strange on the screen. We don't know where to look exactly, but here you are.
I'm sorry not to be there, but an anecdote I could mention is that when IAS 39, which was very controversial at the time back in 2003 and 4, when it was controversial whether it should be endorsed or not. But therefore, should it be carved out or should it be not endorsed at all? So the Commission initiated that one Friday night, quite late, we met in the Commission offices, Karel van Hulle and his boss, David Wright, the French important person, Gerard Schill, Catherine Goodman, and I believe John Smith was there as well. And I was there, of course, otherwise I couldn't tell the story. And then at that meeting, which is not a public meeting, of course, the carved out version of IAS 39 was designed. And a few days later, it was actually redrafted so that it could be put forward for endorsement at the carved out version. And the interesting bit, in addition to how it was actually designed, is that after being reissued as a carved out version, then EFRAG was asked to give endorsement advice on the adjusted version. And it has not been done since with subsequent modifications, but maybe it should be reconsidered to do that again. So that was the story about the late Friday night and the change of, and how the IASB 9 got to the carved out version. Thank you.
Thank you, Stig. So in full transparency, we know now the story, how it went. So, Françoise, I come to you for the anecdote, and we promise not to speak about the train from London to Paris and Brussels.
So, I mean, it's very difficult to select an anecdote because, I mean, life is...
I think it's still...
Yeah, okay.
It's okay. Yeah,
so, life is so full of small things, and it's difficult also to interest an audience with bits of your own life. So, I would remember, in fact, so exactly the time when the FISB was really present and with the convergence program. And I was invited as chairman of TEG to present here and there. And I had one of those slides that explained that, in my view, when the convergence program would be finished, the FISB should not be sent back home. They should stay around the table, but we should also be invited around the same table. And I had a slide showing that, and I was having it in my presentations here and there. And a day we learned that the incoming chairman and vice chairman of IASB, Hans Gevorst and Jan McIntosh, will visit us, EFRAG, at our offices, even if they're luxurious compared to the former ones. That's just the EFRAG offices they were coming. It was, in fact, the first time that the ISB, even incoming but still leadership, would be present in our offices. And Saskia and I prepared, and we were wondering, questioning, what are we going to say? And I said, well, I think I should sell my idea of the round table with everyone. And in fact, I never did. And I never did, and frankly, I was not stopped because all of a sudden I would have been shy. It's just because Hans and Jan, in their discussion with us, introduced the subject and questioned whether we would think it was a good idea. And in fact, all this was just before the ASAF, the advisory forum, was created. And I mean, I remember it as a very good memory, you know, not having to be tense in describing what I was dreaming of, and all saying, what do you think of it?
So that was the story of ASAF, so very, very good. Chiara, what is your little story?
Well, I was thinking I would mention the fastest ever endorsement process in less than 2 weeks between the issuance of an amendment and the completion of the endorsement advice for IBOR during the last period. But then I know that Françoise did better than us, because Stig, yes, because during Stig chairmanship there was a better process, or shorter, to endorse the change to IAS 39 for the reclassification in the middle of the financial crisis of assets outside the fair value. So, I mean, that was the anecdote, but they did better. But then perhaps something that more personal I could mention is that next to IAS 17 endorsement and to delivery of set 1 to the Commission for the ESRS, I also delivered a baby in the meanwhile. And so I remember moving in the new home where I would have spent the maternity, and it was an empty house after the works, and I only had an armchair, and I had to lie down because it was huge. And I could do my hearing at the Econ committee in front of the European Parliament, all alone in this empty house with a big belly that nobody could see. I mean, that was something unbelievable only a few months before, thanks to the remote, the working remotely.
Okay, so the COVID brought also something good, at least that you could continue to work, what otherwise would have been impossible.
Exactly.
Okay, well, we're approaching towards lunchtime, but we had, of course, like you would expect, sort of these three very prominent people asking sort of, do you have messages for our stakeholders here and also for all the ones that apparently are online? Where do you see EFRAG in the future, or what do you want to give as a message? And actually, my panelists wanted to do that as an more interactive discussion than a series of statements. So, Steve, shall you start and then you talk all at the same time? So if the techniques can put all micros on, it would work. And I'm going to sit back.
I would have thought it should be ladies first.
Well, go ahead. I gave you the floor.
Okay. Well, I think, like probably the other two ladies, that EFRAG will stay important and stay influential in cooperation with IASB, and will be a very important player for sustainability reporting or standard setting. I think the sustainability standard setting activity will be the most important and the biggest in EFRAG. Europe must ensure to prevail or be an important player, you could say, and it will be expensive. I will expect a fully 50% board and tech, and say at least 50 staff, plus a bigger administration, you may say 2.5 sessions. I think technology will be more important, and there will be a fight about who decides on technology. I'll reiterate the big need for additional funding, and if Europe wants to be a significant player, the increased funding must be found. Find the money or lose. I hope Europe will prevail.
You want to react?
Yeah, no, well, if I may quote Isaac Newton, I mean, I have been sitting on the shoulders of Stig and Françoise, so sitting on the structure or the process structure and on the people that they put together. So when I think about the role that EFRAG currently has also internationally, and the fact, for example, that EFRAG is running the secretariat of the International Forum of Accounting Standard Setters now, which I have the honor to chair right now. I mean, I think my wish for the future is that EFRAG will continue to be influential in financial reporting and in sustainability reporting internationally as it has been so far. Because to walk, to run, to stay standing, a communication, a corporate communication needs to have two legs equally strong. So financial reporting will continue to be as important as before.
Okay. So I see you looking at the screen. I can sort of read it. So what will be the main challenges in the near future in terms of work? So I think that brings us back to resources, and that brings us back to setting priorities if we don't have these resources. So let us leave it like that. But we're going to listen to Françoise to add a little bit what she sees for the future, perhaps from a retired position, what she wishes EFRAG or what she thinks stakeholders should do.
Well, I really wish that, but I don't really have doubts. Having listened this morning to the developments I had not followed closely before, that EFRAG will indeed be extremely successful in Europe. It's EFRAG serving Europe with this ambition of keeping the social leadership on sustainability reporting, but not only by drafting a paper here or a paper there, but more in drafting standards that are applicable. I think I look at it as being a true challenge for the organization, walking on two legs, which in fact are extremely different, because it's all about giving advice to the European Commission. But one leg is a commentator, is bringing input, it's exercising influence, whereas the other one is really standard setting. And having been part of both EFRAG and ISB, I can really say how different those roles are and how much they're different in the resources and the skills they call for. At the decision level, eventually, the skills are the same, but behind the scene with the stuff which is necessary and the procedures and that are necessary to be a real standard setter, it's a total different dimension. And I will really leave Brussels today being amazed, in fact, really amazed, but beyond, just it's more than, it's impressive. Having run EFRAG with the resources of EFRAG, having only cared for financial reporting in an influential role, I really, and I've looked at the financial reports to see that indeed, from a funding perspective, nothing has happened. And so much more has been produced. And I think, so everybody could say, well, I mean, if they could do that and now they have been able, why should we increase the funding? And I think everybody should be aware that there is a limit in 120% dedication of people, a limit in standards of high productivity being often dig out of nights, not only daytime, but nights of work. And really, we cannot, and it's not just because it's absolutely necessary to speak of funding and stated it, but because to us, having been in charge of EFRAG, I mean, it's obvious to us that you need more funding for these two legs. So I really wish success, but I also wish a lot of wisdom in fact, those who decide on those things.
Steve, do you want, as one man on this panel, to have the last word, or sort of the last word? Because I guess I have the last word.
I think Françoise is right. We need enthusiasm from the involved parties, and we need funding. But I would also say it's interesting how things have happened over the years. If you think about how long time it takes, the first draft set of standards have been delivered to the Commission, and I understand EFRAG expect them back in several months' time. When the amendment to IAS 39 was put forward by ISB, it was put forward, I think it was Monday morning, and it was endorsed by us on Monday lunchtime, and it was approved by the commissioners in the afternoon, and in the official Gazette in the evening. So if you really want the Commission to move, it's possible. Have a wonderful continuation of the conference.
Well, Steve, you don't see Sven looking here. He can't believe what you are saying. So,
but it's true. It's true. Yeah, Françoise was there.
Okay, it brings us to 1:05. So I think we're going to bring this to a close. I think you had a flavor of the history and what the three panelists here contributed to bring EFRAG where we are now. I think what you mentioned, Lasse, as well is EFRAG is also there because of its staff. It's staff that has been growing over the years. This staff that is very committed, puts in a lot of time, and makes this work. They work weekends, they work evenings, nights, whatever is necessary to make it work. The red thread of these resources I will not mention again. I suggest we bring this to a close and that we go to lunch now, and you have to be back at, what was 14:20. It? 14:20. Lunch is on that side.
Thank you.